There is no doubt a toddler's death in Madison late last month should not have happened. Tonight, the agency that protects children from such situations says it has been mischaracterized in court reports.
In a statement to us late this afternoon, Dane County's Human Services Director told us CPS feels Madison Police's description of what happened before that child's death was incomplete and, quote, does not conform to how we operate as a matter of practice. And with that as tonight's backdrop, investigative reporter Naomi Coles tells us what we know about this case and puts it into context with other deaths from abuse or neglect. Naomi?
Yesterday, I showed you how Madison police tried to get CPS to set a removal order for the children, but they said in court records, caseworkers believed there wasn't enough evidence of imminent danger. Today, the standout thing to know is that when a child dies from abuse or neglect in Wisconsin, it is more likely than not that CPS has been involved in the past. That's according to a review of 2020 child deaths that were substantiated as abuse or neglect. In more than half of them, or 17 out of 27 deaths, caseworkers had past contact with the family, often in the form of unsubstantiated abuse or neglect investigations. Time after time, in a review of case records, there was contact with CPS in the 5 years before the death, many times just days or weeks before. It's both in the form of screened out reports, which mean the initial call to CPS wouldn't qualify as maltreatment if it were true, but it's also very commonly in the form of past calls where a report was assessed, but there wasn't enough evidence to substantiate abuse. Other times, caseworkers were still evaluating a report when the child died.
On February 9th,
it's what prompted state lawmakers from both parties in a recent public hearing to question the effectiveness of existing policies.
You know, we're not going to be able to save every single child, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. And when you see those egregious reports where there's so many contacts with Child Protective Services, so many screened out, so many unsubstantiated, and then the child dies.
I do think that we need to get a little bit more of an answer from Department of Children and Families on if we need to help them and their ability to scrutinize a little deeper, because any child that dies from violence is unnecessary.
Except for Milwaukee, Wisconsin's CPS system is county-run with oversight from the state.
So taking a child out of a home is an extreme measure in and of itself.
Wendy Henderson from the state's Department of Children and Families said their approach to removing children from home has evolved in keeping with national best practices. That means minimizing the trauma of removing a child from their home in all but the worst situations. Plus, she believes that looking backwards after a child's death at how policies may or may not have been followed isn't an effective approach.
When you look backwards at any sort of complicated set of rules and systems, the violations of those or the lack of doing a certain thing sometimes isn't as connected to the incident that happened. How do we support workers through these cases, which are tragedies in and of themselves? How do we stop looking at this as a blaming system?
I want to be clear on one thing. Neither the state official you just heard or the lawmakers in that story are specifically commenting on this toddler's death in Madison, but they're rather speaking to general issues. Now, for more on this, later tonight, head to channel3000.com for more details from a special report that aired Sunday on how CPS investigates child abuse.